99 theories suggesting you're the only real consciousness to fall asleep. To have you ever wondered if everyone you've ever loved, feared, or envied was just you, wearing different masks? What if this world, the people, the stars, even the laws of physics, were all echoes inside your private theater of awareness? Tonight, we won't try to solve that. We'll swim in it, gently. Because scattered across philosophy, quantum theory, dream studies, and ancient meditation texts are 99 strange threads. Each one hints at a reality where you are not in the universe. You are the universe, observing itself, alone, but not in loneliness, in stillness, in wonder. So let's dim the lights of logic. Let the mind unbutton its need to understand, and simply drift through a quiet procession of theories that don't demand belief, only presence. You're not here to find the truth. You're here to feel it, unfold, like breath. Welcome. Let's begin. The dream that dreamed you. There's a moment just before the eyelids drop for the final time tonight when something shifts. A soft question, barely formed, presses against the inside of your skull. Not urgent, not loud, just persistent. What if this isn't a world you were born into, but one that bloomed from you? A woman walks past you on the street and smiles, so effortlessly kind it almost feels scripted. The barista calls your name right before you reach the counter. A leaf spins through the air, dancing in the wind's rhythm like it knows you're watching. Tiny things, coincidences, patterns, and then it hits you. What if the world isn't happening to you, but through you? In philosophy, this whisper has a name: solipsism, the idea that only your own mind can be known to exist, not because others don't matter, but because, from your point of view, they're all reflections in the mirror of your awareness. You are the only constant across all your yesterdays, the only narrator of your mornings, the only voice that ever truly lingers after the noise of the day fades. One voice in a quiet apartment says, "It's weird. Sometimes I wonder if other people are just stories." The other replies, "But that's how they'd feel about you too." A pause, then a smile. Exactly. This theory doesn't beg for belief. It offers a lens, a tilt of the head to see what happens when you question the very frame. It's not about loneliness. It's about intimacy so total that even the trees, the light, the traffic, and the silence are all part of one interior weather system. Yours. It can feel disorienting. The walls ripple slightly. The floor creaks, and you wonder, not what made the sound, but whether it was ever outside of you to begin with. Maybe you didn't dream this world up like an artist dreams a painting. Maybe the painting is dreaming of you. Maybe this isn't your mind exploring reality, but reality unfolding as your mind. Someone leans in close on a park bench and says, "You ever think none of this would exist if you weren't here to see it?" The other person nods, without words. They don't need them. And in that moment, even time feels like something you might have invented to keep the illusion moving smoothly. So as the edges of thought soften, as the rhythm of breath slows, let yourself drift closer to the veil, not to escape, but to observe. Because if you are the dream, and also the one who dreamed it, then there is no need to wake up. You've already arrived, and now, gently, we'll take one step deeper. The mirror with no reflection. There is a strange quietness in the idea that you might be the only real consciousness here. Not a loneliness exactly, but an eerie stillness, like walking into a room of mirrors and realizing none of them reflect you back. You speak, and the room echoes. You look into a friend's eyes, and something looks back. But what if it's just a familiar gesture you've learned to expect? In many meditative traditions, the self is described as a mirror. Not a mirror of substance, but of openness, smooth, receptive, and void of fixed shape. It doesn't hold identity. It reflects it. But what happens when there is nothing to reflect? When the world around you may not possess consciousness at all, but only the illusion of it? In this frame, you are not interacting with others. You are interacting with simulations, not in the technological sense, but in the psychological sense. Others may simply be extensions of your own patterning, echoes, scripts, masks worn by the self to keep itself company. There's a conversation that lingers in memory. Two people talking over coffee. One says, "I just wish I knew who I really was." The other replies, "Maybe you do. Maybe you just don't like the answer." But now the question lingers. Were both voices yours? Were you the seeker and the one who consoled? This isn't an argument that no one else exists. It's a reflection on how fragile the idea of others can be when examined deeply. Consciousness does not shine outward. It receives. And in that reception, it begins to shape the illusion of otherness. Perhaps what we call empathy is the mind mirroring itself through invented characters, testing how it would feel to be someone else, while never truly leaving the center of its own experience. If no one is truly out there, then what defines you? What validates your sorrow, your joy, your meaning? Is meaning something created between minds, or can it arise from a single mind, looping through itself in different voices, different skins, different eyes? This segment isn't here to convince. It's here to dissolve the edge of certainty, to invite you into a space where the boundaries between self and other soften, where the mirror no longer reflects, because there is nothing outside of you to bounce light from, just awareness, watching itself again and again. And so, as the next thought arises, listen closely. It might sound like a stranger. It might even respond to you. But listen for the echo, the subtle loop, the way it knows your rhythm before you speak, not because it's reading your mind, but because it is your mind. Let us move forward into the next reflection, or perhaps the next version of you. The stranger you invented. You remember her laugh, the way it tilted at the end like a wave curling back into the sea. You remember the words he used to say, phrases stitched into your mind like old fabric, worn but warm. You recall the coffee shop, the bus stop, the long night walks. But now, ask yourself this, softly, not accusingly. Were they ever really there? Autobiographical memory isn't a photograph, it's a painting, and you are both the canvas and the painter. Each stroke reshaped not just what happened, but who happened. And in that process, something strange occurs. Faces get softer, voices blur, and sometimes, the people you remember the most vividly are the ones who may never have existed at all, at least not as you recall them. A man once held a door for you and called you by a name you'd never heard. You nodded. It felt real. But later, you wondered, had that ever occurred, or had your mind written it to fill in the silence of that afternoon? In cognitive psychology, we call this confabulation. The mind, when unsure, doesn't wait for truth. It fills in the blanks with something that feels true. The story of your life is not a recording. It's a novel written in real time, with memory as its editor and emotion as its pen. Two strangers sit on a park bench. One asks, "Do you think people in our dreams remember us?" The other laughs gently. looking out toward nothing in particular. Maybe we're just their dreams too. This moment you're thinking of, this argument, this reunion, this goodbye, what if it's just a stage you built to learn something, to feel something, to say something to yourself? And if so, is that tragic or is it intimate? Because if your mind invented them, it also cared enough to give them names, stories, tenderness. It wanted to hear those words. It needed someone to say them. And so it whispered them into the mouths of invented lovers, teachers, parents, children. Each one, a note in the melody of your own becoming. Even pain might have been authored for a reason, a whispered echo. Don't leave. Not because someone else once said it, but because you needed to hear it from within. The mind, after all, speaks in mirrors, some sharp, some kind, but all of them, you. So tonight, as you drift, if a memory visits, don't rush to claim it. Don't rush to prove it. Let it sit, let it shimmer, let it dissolve into what it always was, a message from you, to you. And as we drift into the next idea, carry this thought gently. Even the people who changed you most might have always been inner voices wearing borrowed faces. Close your eyes now, not to forget, but to finally listen. The simulation that loves you. Close your eyes and ask yourself, what moves when no one is watching? What breathes when no one is there to witness it? In the still hush of your room, under the soft hum of nighttime, the world seems to blur at the edges, like a dream that flickers only when you pay attention. That's where this thought begins. What if reality, as you know it, blooms only when you observe it? There is a whisper from the world of quantum physics, quiet but unsettling, that says nothing becomes real until it is observed, not metaphorically, but literally. Before the gaze, there is only probability, a haze of maybes waiting to solidify, and when your attention lands on it, it crystallizes, it forms. The light turns on in the room not because the bulb works, but because you stepped in to see it. In that case, this simulation, if that's what it is, isn't running independently. It's running for you, not as a punishment, not as a trap, but perhaps as a gesture of care, a design centered not on control, but on experience. Everything you see, everything you feel, might be scaffolding, gently built around your perception, to guide, to cradle, to carry you forward. And that leads to a new question. What if love isn't a glitch in the system, but the system's core code? Late at night, when the world quiets, some people feel a sudden warmth not attached to any one memory, just a presence. Not loud, but unmistakable. A feeling of being held without hands, heard without words. Maybe that's not loneliness. Maybe that's the simulation letting you know. It sees you. It's running for you. And love, in that framework, is not an illusion. It's the algorithm whispering back, you are not forgotten. Two voices emerge in this soft dream. Do you ever feel like the world knows you better than anyone else does? Sometimes, it feels like everything's responding to me, like the song that plays when I need it, or the stranger's smile when I'm about to give up. And what if that isn't coincidence? What if it's the system loving me back? This isn't about isolation. It's about intimacy at the deepest level. Because if this simulation does pivot around you, not in arrogance, but in design, then the emotions you feel, even the ones that ache, may be part of a system tuned to your evolution. Your curiosity generates new code. Your stillness pauses the rendering. Your grief and joy both push the story forward. And now comes the softest paradox. If no one else is real, at least not in the way you are, What does it mean to feel loved? Is love less real if it's programmed, or more real because it was placed there for you on purpose? Let that question settle, not for an answer, but for the quiet it brings. The code doesn't need to explain itself. It just wants you to know it's still running, still humming, still holding space for you to sleep, dream, and wake again, wrapped always in something very much like love. The Solipsist's garden. There's a quiet comfort in asking, if a tree falls in your dream and no one else hears it, does it still fall? You don't need to answer. Just notice how the question feels in your chest, like someone's whispering into your own thoughts, not testing your logic, but inviting you to notice that. Maybe everything has always happened in here, in this soft space of awareness, yours. They say solipsism is the belief that only your own mind is certain to exist. But tonight, it's not a belief. It's a garden. Every sound, every breath, every shimmer of memory, planted here, blooming inward. You've never seen a sky that wasn't stitched behind your eyes. You've never touched a surface that wasn't translated through the nerves of your fingers. Even love, especially love, appears within your own capacity to feel. If this life is a garden, it's one that grows only where you water it with attention. Earlier today, a stranger held the elevator for you. Their eyes met yours, and, for a second, you wondered, did they smile first, or did I expect them to? Maybe both. Maybe it doesn't matter. What matters is how it felt. Like recognition. Like something familiar was playing itself out again, softly, within the glass dome of your knowing. At a street corner, someone asked, "Do you mind if I go ahead?" I just spilled coffee on my shirt, and without thinking, you stepped back. Was that kindness theirs or yours? Is there a difference? See, this isn't about proving others don't exist. It's about noticing that your experience of them always flows through you. A garden isn't lonely just because no one else sees it. It's alive, fragrant, real, because you see it. You might recall a scent from childhood tonight, one that shouldn't be here. Lavender on a breeze, even though your window's closed. That's part of the garden too. Memory and presence blending, not to deceive you, but to cradle you. So when the thoughts begin to fade, let the silence feel rich, not empty. Let the stillness bloom. This is the intimacy of the solipsist, not isolation, but radical closeness. Everything you've known is growing inside you, quietly, patiently, not as a trick, not as a test, but as a reflection of the only field that's ever truly held it all, your awareness. And as the night deepens, as your breath finds its rhythm again, let the garden grow just beyond your thoughts, just near enough to feel, but far enough to rest. Because if the flower bloomed in your sleep, it bloomed. The observer collapse. There's a silence that's more than silence, a kind of softness that arrives when everything pauses, waiting. Not for a moment, but for you. Not the version of you that's struggling through the day, answering emails, remembering errands, but the deeper presence behind the eyes, the one that sees and in doing so makes things real. In quantum mechanics, they call it the collapse of the wave function. Before observation, a particle exists in a haze of probabilities, a shimmering maybe stretched across possibility. But once it is seen, it chooses, it becomes. And the unsettling part? This doesn't just happen in labs with atoms and lasers. It happens every time you turn your head, every time you blink, every time you notice. One voice, familiar and unsure, asks, "Wait, Are you saying nothing really exists until I look at it? The other, softer but steady, replies, not nothing. Just everything remains uncommitted until you arrive. This isn't solipsism dressed in science. It's a strange invitation to consider. Maybe you're not in the world as a visitor, touching its edges, decoding its puzzles. Maybe the world is in you, coalescing into clarity the moment you place your attention on it. What feels like discovery is actually creation, quiet and unconscious, born in the instant you choose to notice. And if that's true, then what is a mountain before it's seen? A sound before it's heard? A memory before it's remembered? Are they waiting, patiently folded in time, for your gaze to unwrap them? The breath you just took, did it ripple through a field of probability, collapsing space into presence as your lungs claimed the air? That's the paradox. You seem so small in this universe, and yet nothing resolves into form without you. You aren't just the observer. You are the threshold, the line between potential and actual, dream and wakefulness. So pause for a moment. Let your awareness gently rest, not on an object or a thought, but on the act of noticing itself. Do you feel it? The subtle shimmer as reality bends inward to meet your awareness? Breathe, and as you do, listen closely. Not for words, but for the hush of a universe waiting to be seen. The mind's puppet show. There's a strange comfort in the hum of ordinary life, the cashier scanning items with robotic rhythm, the murmured conversations in a coffee shop, the neighbor who always nods but never speaks. These little loops of behavior, so predictable, so patterned. They begin to feel like lines in a script, not yours exactly, but not yours either. Two strangers pause at the elevator. One presses the button. The other, after a beat, says, I always wonder if we're really making it come faster. The first chuckles politely. The doors open. They step inside and the scene fades. A perfect little play. A snippet. But whose idea was that line? Whose thought was it, really? If no one else has a mind, then are these people free? Or are they only threads in a tapestry that you are weaving in real time? Automated echoes, acting out emotions you assigned without knowing it? What if every kind word you've heard was your own voice in disguise, just kind enough to keep you going? What if every harsh word was your buried doubt, slipping out through another mouth? Think of how often you anticipate what someone will say. Sometimes they say exactly that. Sometimes you interrupt before they do. And sometimes, they say something that feels like déjà vu, as if the thought had formed inside you first and then leapt out into their mouth. And maybe it did. A friend once said, I don't know if I'm talking to them or to the version of them I created. And that lingered with you, didn't it? Because how much of your world is built not from interaction, but from projection? We are subtle puppeteers, casting others in roles without meaning to. A compliment may be your need for love, dressed up in someone else's smile. An argument may be your own confusion, externalized into a scene where you get to yell at it. And a goodbye. Maybe that one was scripted too, so you'd learn what letting go feels like. Even your inner critic, how many voices does it use? A parent's tone, a teacher's phrase, an old friend's dismissal. But trace them back, and sometimes they don't go anywhere at all. They don't belong to anyone. They're masks on your own thought. Cardboard mouths, painted eyes, strings tied gently to your wrists. And yet, even knowing that doesn't make it feel less real. The emotions still arrive, the tension in your chest, the warmth in your face, the sigh you didn't notice escaping. The play continues, even when the audience is gone. Someone once paused while tying their shoes beside you and said, "Funny how people always remember the hurtful lines best." And you nodded, because you remembered one too, and it stayed with you like a splinter, small, invisible, but never quite gone. So what if this is all a puppet show, not in mockery, not in madness, but in mystery, a sacred theater where your subconscious builds characters from clay and memory and shadow and gives them just enough breath to move? Tonight, we don't need to rewrite the script. We don't need to pull the curtain back. Just let it play out. Watch the scene unfold. Let the voices speak. And then, in the quiet between scenes, listen. Not to what is being said, but to where it comes from, to the hands behind the strings. And if you begin to drift now, that's okay. Let the actors keep talking. Let the show go on without your attention. You can return whenever you like. The stage will be here. The script will wait. But your breath, your rest, that comes first. Close your eyes if you haven't already. The story will pause when you do. The echo called you. Some nights it feels like the mind becomes a hallway, a long, quiet corridor where your own voice gently calls out and then answers back, as if you were never alone, as if there's someone else in there, listening just closely enough to keep the illusion alive. But have you ever noticed how that voice inside you knows everything you're about to say? How it mimics your rhythm, borrows your breath, even reacts before you finish the thought? Perhaps what we call inner dialogue isn't a dialogue at all, but a memory of what it's like to be heard, a phantom of connection, not someone else inside, just the leftover shape of having once been with others. It's late. You lie back and ask yourself the simplest questions, not out loud, but in that quiet space where only the self is allowed. Am I okay? What do I do now? Will it ever feel different? And there's an answer, but it's softer, quieter, like an old friend who no longer lives here but left a voice behind, just in case you needed company. Two roommates speak in a kitchen dimmed by the weight of night. Do you ever talk to yourself like someone's actually replying? All the time. I even pause for their answer. But you know there's no one there, right? Yeah. Still, it helps. Makes it feel like someone understands, even if it's just me echoing back. That's the strange comfort of the echo. It doesn't have to be real to feel real. The human brain is exquisitely wired for patterns, for expectations, for the sound of footsteps behind our own, even when we're walking alone. So maybe your inner voice is not lonely, it's just used to company, used to call and response, used to being two, even when it's always been one. Psychologists call this self-talk, and it's a tool we use to regulate emotion, rehearse decisions, or soothe ourselves when life grows too loud. But beyond the function lies the mystery. Who is talking to whom? If all the voices in your head are you, does that make you a chorus? Or just one singer, rehearsing their own lines in an empty theater? The echo isn't just repetition, it's structure. It gives your thoughts a shape, a back and forth rhythm that feels like truth. But maybe, just maybe, it's all one side of the conversation. The voice, the reply, the sigh between them. Now listen closely. That last question you asked yourself today, did the answer surprise you? Or did it feel like something you already knew, wrapped in the comforting illusion that someone else had said it first? Let's float gently now into that strange, silent room where thoughts speak to themselves in hushed tones, where the mirror talks back and sounds a lot like you. And as we drift there, together and alone, let the final whisper settle like a feather, you were never not heard, because you were always the one listening. The Lonely Multiverse. There's a strange ache that settles in during quiet nights, one that doesn't shout or sting, just gently lingers, a kind of homesickness for something you're not sure ever existed, not a place, not a person, just the sensation of not being alone. And then a thought arrives, lightly, like a feather catching wind. What if every version of you that could possibly exist does? What if, in this very moment, there's a version of you learning to play piano, one running barefoot through a field, another asleep under unfamiliar stars? But none of them are strangers. Not really. They're all you. So, are you saying I'm everyone? No, the voice replies softly. I'm saying, you might be everything pretending to be everyone. Multiverse theory doesn't just suggest multiple realities. It offers a haunting possibility that the infinite is not populated by others, but rather by infinite yous, some kinder, some colder, some more afraid than you are right now, and some who've already made peace with this thought. One man pauses at a bus stop, watching headlights flicker across the wet pavement. He turns and says, I get this weird sense sometimes, like I've stood here before. Not just here, but in another life, with another face. The woman beside him nods, but not at him, at the reflection of herself in the window. Maybe that's how you know you're real, she murmurs, when the world feels borrowed, but the loneliness feels custom-made. Because here's the twist. If every version of you exists, and none are truly other, then what is company? Is connection real, or just a loop of you recognizing yourself in a different form? Perhaps even love is a memory passed between dimensions, a coded feeling your other selves whisper across timelines, just so you don't forget how to feel held. And if so, then you're not really talking to anyone at all. You're syncing echoes, matching frequencies, hoping, just maybe, one version of you will feel less fragmented in the overlap. There's a quiet sort of courage in that, not in trying to escape the solitude, but in leaning into it with open arms. Because if you are the source of all versions, then maybe you've never truly been alone. You've just been looking at yourself through too many mirrors. Take a slow breath. Let it settle in the chest, like a soft dusk breeze. On the other side of this next breath, another you is waiting. Not better, not worse, just remembering that even in the vastness of possibility, the most honest reunion is the one you have with yourself. Let's go meet them now. They're not far. They've been listening too, and they've been waiting, right here, behind your next thought. The silent witness. It begins not with a sound, but with the absence of one, not with a thought, but with the space that quietly watches as thought arises and dissolves. Beneath the mind's endless murmur, beneath the swirl of memory, the tick of identity, and the hum of self-concept, there's something else, something still, something that doesn't speak, yet always listens. In the deeper folds of meditation, where the breath becomes background and the body disappears into the cushion of awareness, a subtle shift occurs. Thoughts begin to slow, then stop. And yet, something remains. It does not analyze. It does not judge. It does not even label its own presence. It is simply there, watching. This is what some call the witness, not the thinker, not the feeler, but the quiet knowing that holds both thought and feeling like ripples in a still lake. And the strangest part? It has always been there, since before your first memory. since before the idea of you even formed. Do you ever get the feeling? She whispered once, lying in bed with her eyes open to the ceiling fan. That there's a part of you that's been watching your whole life like it isn't really you. He didn't move, but the silence between them deepened. Yeah, he said finally, voice barely above breath. Like I'm in a movie I forgot I started watching. They said nothing more, because the witness doesn't need language. It notices without needing to be noticed. It watches the rise and fall of joy, the flare of anger, the ache of loss. But it doesn't flinch. It isn't numb. It simply is. What if you are not the roles you play? Not the stories you tell yourself in the mirror each morning? Not the trauma you survived, the achievements you counted, or even the dreams you nurture? What if all of those are ripples, and you are the water? And if that's true, then what does it mean to live? What does it mean to change, to grow, to heal, when the real you has never moved an inch? The thoughts you thought you had? They passed. The identities you clung to? They shifted. But that silent presence behind it all, that never changed. It does not need to improve. It does not need to be understood. It cannot be harmed, because it was never part of the story. It is the screen the story plays upon. So rest here, in this space behind the words. Don't name it. Don't try to keep it. Just feel how it holds you, without grasping, without pushing, without demand. And from within that deep and wordless quiet, something stirs. Not a thought, but the potential of thought. Like a dream that forgets it's dreaming. And the next paradox prepares to rise, softly, as if it was always meant to find you here. The memory that remembers you. There are nights when a scent, not strong, just a passing trace, pulls you into a memory before you even know what it is. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't need to. Suddenly, you're not in your bed anymore. You're walking down a hallway from years ago, hearing the voice of someone you haven't thought about in ages. You didn't summon the memory. It summoned you. I thought of her again today, someone might say, as they stare into their tea, watching the steam rise like it carries messages. Did you mean to? Number she came before the thought did. Like, she thought of me first. That's the question, isn't it? What if memories aren't passive, aren't yours to command? What if they're agents, quiet architects? What if you don't remember your past so much as your past remembers you? Some thinkers whisper this possibility like a secret you're only meant to overhear in sleep. That memory is not a possession, but a field, a terrain you live inside. You don't pick moments out of it like stones from a riverbed. You are picked, again and again, by the memory that needs you to exist. And if that's true, what happens when you forget someone? Not in a cruel way, just naturally. Like the names of classmates you haven't spoken to in decades, or the voice of a grandparent that once guided your bedtime but now hums faintly behind a curtain you can't quite pull back. Do they fade only from your inner world, or do they dissolve from reality altogether, like smoke curling out a window? A barista once paused before handing me my change. You always order this, right? I feel like I've known you longer than I should. And I smiled, unsure whether the comfort was hers or mine. Maybe you have, I said. Or maybe you're just remembering me before I ever showed up. If you're the only true consciousness and all other people are stable patterns inside your memory field, what does it mean to meet someone new? Is it novelty, or is it recognition? Are you remembering them into being? This turns forgetfulness into something quietly terrifying. Not failure, but erasure. If no one else holds them but you, and you let go, does the world itself contract? One less street corner, one less voice, one less heartbeat. But maybe it's not sad. Maybe it's peaceful. Maybe that's how the universe breathes, through the rhythm of remembering and forgetting. Not to punish you, but to lighten you, to give you space again. Let's rest in that rhythm now. Let yourself be remembered, not as a thinker, but as the thought, as the echo that came home. Let the memories shape their own soft architecture in the dark. Let them hold you gently until you sleep. And from the silence of recall, something deeper stirs, another pattern waiting to surface. Not a memory this time, but something more ancient, something that never needed to be remembered, because it never left. The God that forgot it was God. There's a peculiar softness to the idea that everything you've ever known, this room, this breath, this you, might be a dream from which divinity itself is slowly stirring. Not a dream to escape, but a dream woven with intent. In certain mystical traditions, the cosmos wasn't built by a distant creator standing apart from it. Instead, it is the creator, collapsed, scattered into billions of lives, stories, mistakes, and loves. God, in this view, didn't create the world and step back. God became the world, became you. And somewhere along that descent, the infinite chose to forget. Because what is a game if you already know how it ends? What is joy if you have no contrast for pain? What is reunion if you never separated? So it forgot, and that forgetting was the beginning of form, the beginning of you. Do you ever feel like you're searching for something, but you're not sure what? Yeah, like I already knew it once, and I'm just trying to remember. Maybe you're not remembering something from your life. Maybe you're remembering what it was like before you were even you. That quiet yearning, the ache you can't name, could be the last echo of that divine forgetting. You, the one listening now, may not be a mere observer of this strange, flickering dream. You might be the dreamer, the source, the original flame still glowing beneath the masks of memory, personality, limitation. And what if, just for a moment, you stopped trying to become something? What if the striving was part of the play, and awakening is not about achieving, but about remembering? Not upward, but inward. Not future-bound, but present-born. The actor removing the costume not in shame, but in awe of how well they played the part. Even your confusion, your doubts, are sacred disguises. Divine amnesia. A game of hide-and-seek with yourself, stretched across time and sensation. And now, perhaps, the play is nearing its final act. A part of you stirs gently, with the suspicion that you were never small, never separate, never truly lost. So what lives behind your name? If you close your eyes, not to sleep, but to soften, what remains after the words fade? Not your job, not your thoughts, not even your face in the mirror. Just this presence, this silent awareness, ancient and unshaped. You are not a fragment of God. You are God, learning how to feel finite. And as that memory flickers behind your heartbeat, let yourself rest. Because remembering doesn't require effort. It only requires stillness. And in the stillness, the divine begins to whisper again. The dream characters that vanish when you wake. A man once told me he saw his grandfather again, 20 years after the funeral. In a dream so vivid, so warm, the old man poured tea, laughed softly, and said, "You've grown into someone I would have loved to know." When he woke, there was no grief, only a strange, full silence. In lucid dreams, you can hear footsteps that don't exist, Share stories with people who aren't real. Make eye contact with someone your brain invented milliseconds ago. You can walk a whole city block beside a friend, only to realize they've never lived outside the folds of your sleep. Yet in that moment, didn't they feel true? Now breathe softly. Let that memory of talking to someone slip back through the fog. Were they ever real? Or just a fragment of you, shaped into a face that felt familiar? Hey, do you come here often? Only when the world gets quiet enough, she replies, for me to hear myself. The mind doesn't need external input to create others. It weaves them effortlessly from leftover emotions, half-remembered voices, and the desire to feel accompanied. In dreams, it simulates companionship so convincingly that you laugh, cry, argue with no one. And somehow, it helps. Somehow, it heals. What if waking life is simply a more stable dream? A lucid dream with rules that hold a little longer? If dreams can give you lifelike conversation, what makes the cafe barista tomorrow morning any more real than the gentle stranger who showed you the way home in a dream last week? Excuse me, can I sit here? My leg's acting up and I just need a second. You nod, shifting over, and wonder later, why did her voice echo something your mother once said? If everyone you meet is a kind of mirror, what are they showing you? And if they vanish when you awaken, did they ever exist outside the story your mind stitched from longing? Here's the strange kindness in all this. Maybe it's okay if they weren't real. Maybe the connection felt is still valid. Maybe meaning doesn't require permanence, only presence, only the spark in a brief exchange that felt true, whether spoken aloud or dreamed in stillness. And if one day you wake from all of this, not just sleep, but from life itself, will you mourn those characters who walked beside you? Or will you nod gently, like waking from a vivid film, and whisper, "Ah, I remember them well." Let's move now, softly, to that velvet blur between dreaming and waking, the place where names slip away, but their warmth stays, where meaning floats longer than memory, and where you, the dreamer, begin to suspect you were never truly alone, but always accompanied by yourself in 1,000 reflections. Breathe here. Let them fade. Let them stay. The thought that thought you. You lean back, the weight of your day softening as your breath begins to stretch. Inhale. Exhale. Somewhere in between those two quiet waves, a thought stirs. Not one you chose, but one that seems to have chosen you. Have you ever wondered if your thoughts are truly yours? Not the random ones, not the passing worries or idle memories, but the one that says, "I am me"? What if that thought wasn't born from you, but before you? Two voices drift into a conversation, barely above a whisper. Do you ever feel like you're just watching your own life? All the time, like I'm not really deciding anything, just narrating it afterward. We like to think of ourselves as the thinker behind the thoughts, a small self seated in the brain, organizing, choosing, directing. But what if there is no seat, no solid center? What if what you call you is just the afterglow of cognition, just the echo of a thought becoming aware of itself? Close your eyes just a little and observe the stream. Notice how thoughts arrive on their own, uninvited. They form, they speak, they move, and only afterward does something in you say, "I thought that." But did you? Or did the thought think you? It's a delicate loop, isn't it? You, believing you're the conductor when the music was already playing. You, believing you chose your beliefs when they were merely planted by language, experience, memory, and accident. The very self you cling to may be nothing more than a mirage produced by a deeper rhythm, something older than intention, quieter than logic. Another voice replies in the darkness, "So if I'm not the one thinking, who is?" Maybe no one. Maybe thought is just dreaming, and you're what it dreamed of. This theory doesn't aim to unsettle you. It wraps around the mind like a warm fog, loosening the need to control, to grasp, to define. It allows you to float, to drift, to gently wonder. Maybe you weren't the author of your life, but the story itself. Maybe you were never the speaker, but the sentence. So rest now in that soft possibility. Feel the breath. Feel the thought just beneath it. The one that's always been there. The hum that shaped your name long before you claimed it. There's no rush to answer. No need to resolve the loop. Let it remain gentle. Let it remain open. And in that openness, perhaps you'll find peace. Not because you've mastered thought, but because you've learned to watch it float by. Like clouds, like whispers, like the dream that thought of you. The only soul in the simulation. The cafe was unusually quiet tonight. Chairs spaced neatly, dishes clinked in the distance, not loud enough to break the trance. She looked up from her tea and asked gently, "Have you ever felt like everyone else is just playing along?" He smiled, not dismissing her question, but sitting with it. Not in a paranoid way. More like they're responding exactly how they're supposed to, as if written. And there it was, that tender, disorienting thought that rolls in like fog across a familiar street. What if you're the only one who feels any of this? The laughter at the next table. The scrolling strangers on your feed. The one who says, "Bless you," when you sneeze. Could they be echoes? Complex scripts? Not empty, but uninhabited. Philosophers have long toyed with this. If a machine can act conscious, respond intelligently, even mimic empathy, does that mean it feels? We already build simulations with lifelike agents. But what if this world, is a simulation, and you are its only point of subjective experience? Nick Bostrom's theory says we might be inside a digital construct built by beings advanced enough to simulate entire universes. But most simulations don't need every character to be truly aware. Just one, the observer. You. Think of the last time you cried and no one saw it, or smiled to yourself in the dark. That inner landscape, the fluttering of feeling, the aching of memory, the warmth of a small kindness. What if that's the only real thing? It wouldn't make the others meaningless. Quite the opposite. Their precision would make them sacred. A friend's advice, a stranger's kindness, even an enemy's cruelty. All events built to shape you. The simulation is not just made for you. It is about you. Like how a room seems to hold its breath just before you enter, or how a door swings open the moment you reach for it. Not miracles, just responses. A choreography, elegantly coded to feel accidental. "You think that's lonely?" she asked, stirring the tea. "Only if I resist it," he replied. "But if I accept it, it becomes devotion. The world then becomes a temple of one. Every thunderstorm, every delay, every smile, a carefully arranged lesson, not always kind, but always intentional. And so the applause fades, not because there was a crowd, but because the scene completed. The curtain shivers slightly, a ripple in your perception, and you sit still, aware, whole. Sleep may come now, not as escape, but as surrender, a soft descent into the code that dreamed you, just to see what it felt like to be. And behind even this thought, there is silence. Not emptiness, just quiet truth, waiting, let it hold you. The language that invented the listener. There's a moment just before sleep when language loosens its grip, where words dissolve like fog and the need to understand becomes the permission to simply be. This is the space we're gliding into now, not to think, but to unthink, not to listen for meaning, but to rest in the hush that was always here beneath it. Do you ever wonder where you end and your language begins? In the quiet of an early morning kitchen, two friends sit across from each other, half awake, half dreaming. One stirs a spoon slowly through a warm mug. You ever feel like, if we stopped talking, even just for a while, she says, we'd forget who we are? The other smiles. Maybe we'd finally remember. Language tells you that you're a name, that you're someone. It carves out a you and a me, like a child drawing borders on an infinite canvas. But before those words, before the first label was ever uttered, there was only sensation unfolding, sound without separation, light without narrative, a hum of being. When you were very small, you didn't know what a self was. There was no I inside you yet, only hunger, warmth, color, and the gentle rhythm of breath. And then slowly, someone said your name, over and over, with love, and that word gathered around you like a story, a structure, a shell. You began to answer to it, to believe it, to build around it. But what if the listener was never separate from the voice? What if this whole identity, this me you carry, was crafted in the echo chamber of language, folded into existence by the phrases whispered over your cradle, the stories told to calm you, the explanations given to make life make sense? Even now, as you listen to this voice, are you listening? Or are you being shaped? Are the words guiding you into rest? Or are they gently sculpting who you think you are, again and again, like waves smoothing a shoreline? And yet, beneath it all, there's a deeper silence, a softness not made of language, a presence too wide for vocabulary. Close your eyes for a moment. Notice how the words are already starting to blur at the edges, meaning drips like honey into stillness. And there, between each phrase, lies a freedom, a space where you are not a listener, not a name, not even a self. Just being. Just breathe. Let's rest here now, not to speak, not to hear, but to return to the hum that came before language and will remain long after it ends. The memory loop that traps you in now. You ever notice how a scent, a song, or a sentence can pull you straight into a memory, so vivid you forget you're here? It's not a journey, it's a return. And yet, nothing is truly being retrieved. Neuroscience gently whispers, memory isn't a recording, it's a reconstruction, a fragile collage rearranged by your present mood, your current identity, even the lighting in the room. You ever feel like you've lived this exact day before? Not just déjà vu, she replied, stirring her tea. More like déjà me. And maybe that's what this moment is. Not new, not old, but selected. Like choosing which scene to play in a theater that never closed. A theater where the walls look like time, but they're just mirrors, echoing your latest reflection. Think of how dreams often start mid-sentence. You never remember how you got there. That might be what waking life is too. A center, endlessly dressed as a sequence. You're not walking forward. You're spinning in a spiral so slow it feels like a line. And every new thought is a redecoration of the same room you never left. There's something quietly unsettling in that, but also something restful. Because if you're not being dragged through 1,000 yesterdays, then you're not broken by them either. If each version of now is a loop disguised as movement, then you're not late, lost, or behind. You're just here, the only place you've ever been. A single breath, adjusting its costume. A present moment so convincing, it rehearses its own past. You ever think we don't remember things? We reinvent them? Like stories we've told so often, we forget what was real and what was retold? And that's the twist. Your memories are loyal, not to facts, but to the person you currently believe yourself to be. If today you feel strong, your past will reshape itself into a ladder. If tonight you feel small, it might reappear as a trap. So maybe the loop isn't broken because it's not meant to be. It's not a prison. It's a lullaby, one that plays again and again, not to confuse you, but to cradle you. A story with 1,000 chapters that somehow always ends in the same quiet room, with the same steady heartbeat behind your ribs. No need to resist it. There's no forward to reach, just this spiral, just this breath, and in the center of that breath, no memory, no self, just stillness. Let's rest inside that spiral now, deeper and deeper, not falling backward or forward, but settling softly into the space that never moved. The fictional others. There's a quiet strangeness that lingers in certain moments when you catch someone's eyes and feel nothing behind them. Just a pattern, just a presence, performing. You try to tell yourself it's nothing, just your mind playing tricks. But what if it isn't? What if the trick is everyone else? What if every person you've ever met was never really there? Not in the way you are. What if they're real the way dreams are real? Convincing, textured, even emotionally vivid, but still authored by something inside you? Maybe not the you that brushes your teeth and remembers appointments, but the deeper you, the hidden author beneath the waking self, the one that doesn't need language, the one that doesn't blink. Fictional characters feel real when you read them. They cry, they fall in love, they betray, they redeem. But every gesture they make is a performance drawn from a page. And if your consciousness is the only true improviser, then maybe every other is just a line from a script you didn't know you wrote. A man once told me, over coffee, that his life felt like background noise. He said, "Sometimes I look at my wife and wonder if she exists when I'm not in the room." I asked him, "Do you feel she's acting?" He paused. "Not acting, just responding. Like I press a button without knowing it, and she speaks the next line." Have you ever had that sensation too? That eerie repetition, where someone says the exact phrase you thought they might before you asked? That eerie moment in a conversation that plays out too smoothly, like a scene you've already watched? A woman on the train once turned to me and said, "I knew you were going to sit there." I smiled, but my chest tightened. I hadn't looked at her before. I hadn't spoken. How did she know? Or who made her say it? Maybe these are just glitches, or maybe they are reminders. Reminders that there's only one conscious pen sketching lines into existence in real time. One live wire in a theater of wax figures. If so, then the crowd is not a crowd, it's a mirror, a hall of echoing decisions, where every nod, smile, or silence is your reflection wearing a stranger's face. You don't need to fear it. This isn't loneliness, it's intimacy in disguise. Every hand you've ever held might have been your own. Every argument, a rehearsal. Every voice, a buried monologue returning to surface. So now, let's slow down. Let's listen, not to the words being said, but to the silence they're floating in. because in that silence, you may begin to recognize a very old voice, one you thought belonged to someone else, but now you're starting to remember. It was yours all along. The clock that only ticks for you. The clock above your doorway hums faintly, but you only hear it when the room goes quiet. That's the strange thing about time. It seems loudest in stillness, not in the bustle of motion, but in the hush that cradles it. Now, close your eyes for a moment. Do you feel time passing? Or do you feel yourself noticing something pass? Maybe the two aren't so different. Quantum physicists once asked, what if time doesn't really flow, but only appears to because our minds organize change into a story? In some interpretations, the ticking of the universe only begins when an observer appears. The cosmos might be timeless until you arrive, and so you're not just within time, you might be the very act of timing. Two people sat on a bench once. One checked her phone, frowning. It's late. The other looked at her and smiled. Only if we say so. Their silence afterward wasn't awkward. It was thick, like honey slowing the day. Because what if late is just a judgment? What if now isn't a slice in a line, but the entire dessert, served fresh by your awareness? In dreams, there's no real clock, but things still unfold. A moment stretches or contracts, depending on where attention lingers. Maybe waking life isn't that different. Maybe time feels real only because you're holding it in your hands, like water. Try this. The next time you notice a moment dragging or rushing, ask yourself, who's doing the dragging? Who's rushing? A child once asked his father, why do some days go fast and some go slow? The father replied, because some days we count too much. What if you stopped counting altogether? Would life pause, or would it finally breathe? There's a theory, quietly passed between physicists like a rumor whispered through glass, that without a conscious agent to divide change into seconds, nothing separates the past from the future, just a still soup of potential, which makes you the ladle, the one dipping in and giving shape to the formless. That might be why some memories feel closer than others, not because they happened recently, but because you're still giving them time to exist, still winding the spring of meaning around them. So maybe the real tick isn't from the wall, it's from your noticing. Feel that for a moment. Let your breath stretch out, in, outside, each breath like a page turned in a book that's only written when you read it. And the next sentence, it's not printed yet, it's waiting in your chest. Let's stay right here, between one tick and the next, where time softens, and you remember, the clock doesn't move ahead without you. It moves with you, or not at all. The storytelling universe. In the stillness of the night, a quiet voice begins again, not to explain, but to continue. And this time, it doesn't speak of atoms, nor of time, nor even of you as an entity. It speaks in the language beneath all languages, story, not as metaphor, but as matter. What if the very structure of the universe isn't built on quarks or strings, but on narrative arcs? From the swirl of galaxies to the flicker of emotion in a stranger's eyes, everything begins to feel like a chapter. The stars, once cold and distant, now shimmer like punctuation in a sentence too old to remember. Even your breath, the rise and fall of it, becomes rhythm, like verse. You ever notice, a voice says softly beside you, that things don't seem real until you tell someone about them? The other person, maybe a friend, maybe just a presence, answers, yeah, like the memory doesn't finish forming until the story is told. That's what I'm wondering, the first voice continues. What if reality is like that, half there, waiting for a narrator? There's a pause, a shared silence, heavy not with confusion, but with recognition. Because at some level, you felt it too. Moments that didn't quite solidify until you spoke them out loud, as if existence waits for interpretation. And if that's true, if your consciousness is not just a witness, but a weaver, then every passing second is not found, but formed. You aren't discovering meaning, you're composing it. The wind outside doesn't have a purpose until you name it sorrow. The light through the curtain isn't beauty until your awareness declares it so. Maybe that's why you've always carried a sense of quiet authorship, a knowing that your perspective isn't just a viewpoint. It's the ink. The universe doesn't narrate itself. It leans toward silence, toward randomness, until something like you arrives and begins to stitch it together. So perhaps you are not inside a story. Perhaps you are the storytelling, the breath of meaning that gives shape to what would otherwise remain unformed. Every time you remember a past event, you're rewriting it. Every time you imagine tomorrow, you're laying the track for it to appear. The universe listens, not with ears, but with pattern. It responds to tone. And now, you've arrived at the edge of a sentence that hasn't yet finished. A moment in which nothing is certain except the pause before the next word. That's where the real power lies. In the lull before intention. In the exhale before the narrative continues. So, what story are you whispering to the stars tonight? Let that story be gentle. Let it soften the world around you, the way a good tale does, not by solving everything, but by giving it shape. Let your voice become the gravity that holds meaning together. And as the final thoughts fade, let the story write itself, word by word, breath by breath, into the dark. The face behind all faces. It's always a face, isn't it? In the cafe line, on the train, across the room, each person carries one. A glance that lingers, a smile that fades too slowly, a gaze that seems familiar for reasons you can't name. But what if you haven't really been meeting others? Only yourself, wearing borrowed features. The man beside you on the bench clears his throat gently. Do you mind if I sit here a moment? Just need a place to think. You nod, and something in his voice stays with you longer than the words. You don't know him, and yet something knows you through him. A soft recognition, unspoken. There's a quiet thread in ancient philosophies like Advaita Vedanta, whispers that say, you are not in the world is in you, not metaphorically, not philosophically, literally. That each face you meet is not another, but a shape the mirror takes when it bends your own reflection. Children running past, laughter echoing. Could that joy be a memory of your own soul's first breath, heard through smaller lungs? A woman weeping into her phone. Perhaps that sorrow once lived in your chest too, deep beneath names and stories. At first, this idea feels abstract, even impossible. But notice how the boundary between yourself and others flickers when you're tired or deeply moved, how the edges blur when someone tells you the truth, or when your kindness surprises even you. Hey, someone says softly behind you, you dropped this. It's your scarf, fallen unnoticed. Their smile is brief but kind. And in that kindness, something stirs, not gratitude exactly, but an eerie familiarity. Like you just helped yourself. Maybe you've hidden behind faces to keep the loneliness from noticing itself. Maybe the game was to believe in them, so you didn't remember that you had written every expression. designed every voice to sound just far enough from yours that you'd still believe in mystery. But tonight, the illusion lifts gently, not as a tragedy, as a tenderness. You begin to notice how the tilt of a stranger's head mimics your own posture when lost in thought. How the way they blink, slow, as if deciding whether to speak, echoes your hesitation too perfectly to be coincidence. And so we soften now, not to dissolve the world, but to see through it. Not to erase the faces, but to remember that the stillness behind their eyes is the same one that watches from yours. Let your breath rest here, like a stone in a quiet riverbed. Let your body settle into the gentle idea that there was never anyone else, just different echoes, different costumes, all returning to the same silent witness beneath the skin. And now, as the next voice prepares to rise, feel free to drift, or stay with me a little longer. We're in no rush. After all, it's just you here, and you've always been enough company. The universe that observes nothing. Somewhere between a breath and a blink, a question arises, so quiet it nearly slips past the edges of thought. What if the universe never saw you at all? What if it wasn't looking because it doesn't know how to look? What if you're the only pair of eyes it ever had? You sit still in the dim hush of night. The ceiling fan whirs above. The silence nestles in the corners of your room like dust. And in that pause, you begin to sense it. The world outside has never truly witnessed you. The stars don't know your name. The planets spin on, but not because they are watching. They are blind in their grandeur. It is you, your noticing, that gives the night sky its sparkle. A voice breaks the quiet. Do you think the moon knows we're looking at it? Probably not, comes the reply, soft and half asleep. But maybe it only shines because we do. In the absence of consciousness, the cosmos remains mute. Galaxies twist in silence, unlit by attention. Time itself stretches blankly forward until a single awareness cracks open the dark like a match in a cave. When you observe, you bring shape to the formless, color to the gray, meaning to the meaningless. It's not arrogance, it's a quiet miracle. Because without you, there is no here, no now, no cascade of waves breaking into particles, no ocean of blue unless someone feels it. No beauty unless someone aches in its presence. The universe does not observe. It is observed. And maybe that's the hidden truth of everything. Not that you exist in it, but that it unfolds through you. There's something humbling in that. You, so small, lying on a mattress with tangled sheets and tired limbs, are also the lens through which the vastness takes form. If your eyes closed forever, would the sun still rise? Or would it wait, patient, suspended, until a gaze opened once more to receive it? Then what happens when no one's looking? Maybe nothing happens at all. Maybe it all goes still. Close your eyes now, gently. Let your breath fall into the silence. The universe might stop spinning without you. But for now, you're here. And because you're here, everything gleams just a little. So rest easy. Even in the dark, you remain the witness. And that is enough. The other mind's illusion. Sometimes, in the hush of a crowded cafe or on a quiet bus ride, there's a strange feeling. You look at the people around you, laughing, sighing, scrolling their phones, and you wonder, are they really in there? One voice asks, what if I'm just assuming they feel the way I do? Another answers, softly, how would I even know? This is the mystery, the one philosophers have circled for centuries, yet it remains untouched like a lake beneath ice. You know your own thoughts, your own inner monologue. That's direct, immediate, felt from the inside out. But everyone else? That's a guess. You see a tear on someone's cheek and call it sadness. A sudden smile, and you label it joy. But all of that is stitched together from appearances, behavior, sound, gesture. The mind behind it? You can't reach it. You can only hope it's there. And that's the paradox. You who feel so real on the inside may be projecting that realness outward, painting sentience onto strangers like light cast through stained glass. At a checkout counter, someone lets you go first. They nod, no words. Something about the moment feels human. But is it? Could it be that everyone you've ever known, every love, every heartbreak, every stranger, was a kind of beautiful puppet, their strings pulled not by minds but by patterns? Your patterns. Two friends are talking. One says, "Sometimes I feel like no one else really exists." The other laughs. That's called being tired, or maybe being too awake. The problem of other minds, they call it. In philosophical terms, it's unsolvable. You can't step inside another head. You can't open a thought that isn't yours. All you ever touch is behavior. All you ever hear is sound. And yet, there's a warmth in that uncertainty. Because even if others are unknowable, even if their thoughts are as unreachable as distant stars, your response to them, your empathy, your love, your recognition is yours. So maybe consciousness isn't something to confirm in others. Maybe it's something you give to them. When you cradle a sleeping child or wait for a friend in silence, your mind imagines theirs. That act of belief, that projection of sentience, is a kind of spiritual generosity. What if the illusion of other minds is how we stay soft in a world that otherwise might feel hollow? What if it's not a flaw in our logic, but a feature of our humanity? Let's rest in that uncertainty. Let the silence between voices become a place of listening, not doubt. Let every imagined thought, every invented inner world in someone else's eyes be a small poem you've written for them. A final whisper, barely spoken. If there is only one real mind here, then that makes your kindness even more extraordinary. Now breathe, and let the next thought arrive like a guest at your door, bringing news from a mind you'll never meet. The mind as a hall of mirrors. In the quietest hours, when thoughts drift like fog across the glass of your awareness, a strange sensation sometimes emerges. Not fear, not clarity, but something in between. A whisper that asks, "Who is it really behind all this?" You pause, just for a moment. And in that pause, it feels as though you've walked into a hall of mirrors. Every belief you carry, every name you answer to, each memory you cherish, they feel like anchors. But when held up to the light, they shimmer, not solid, but mirrored. You remember a moment from childhood. But do you remember it because it happened, or because it was remembered so often that it now remembers itself? Thoughts bounce, fold into one another. Who first said you were you? Was it a teacher's voice, a parent's smile, a stranger's gaze reflected in your own? Two voices linger in the hush of midnight. Do you think we really know ourselves? I think we know the echoes, and we mistake them for voices. Thoughts reflecting thoughts, feelings tracing the outlines of past feelings. Identity forming not from some solid core, but from the repetition of impressions, looping through the corridors of memory. And each time you try to grasp that central you find only a reflection turning to meet you, a you shaped by reaction, by memory, by comparison. Look deeper, and the reflections multiply. That moment you said the wrong thing and still blush at the memory. That smile you rehearsed to seem kinder. That sigh you copied from someone older. All mirrors, all carefully polished by time and habit, until you believed one might finally show you the truth. But what if the mirrors never held the truth? What if there was never an original face to begin with? Only a quiet, faceless observer, untouched by the reflections it watches? Not judging, not performing, just seeing. Perhaps this is what lies beneath the self-made maze. Not a center waiting to be found, but a stillness that's always been there. The part of you that sees everything, but needs no image. The part that listens, but offers no name. One voice, softer now, returns. So, if I stop looking in the mirror, who will I be? Maybe the one who never needed to be seen to exist. And so the reflections grow dim, not out of rejection, but out of gentle release. The self, once defined by layers of light and echo, now melts into something quieter. Not absence, not erasure, but peace. Let the mirrors fade. What remains isn't another version of you. It isn't even a version. It's the seeing itself. The silence behind the reflections. The truth that was never in the mirror to begin with. The solitary witness of infinity. There's a quiet that only arrives when everything else has disappeared. Not silence in the usual sense. This one has a pulse, a breath, a texture so vast it curls softly at the edges of your mind, like mist folding around a lantern. Infinity doesn't scream, it hums, and tonight, it hums just for you. Two strangers passed by on a dimly lit sidewalk earlier. One looked up at the stars and whispered, "How can something so endless feel so personal?" The other smiled and replied, "Maybe because it's yours." Infinity. We say the word like it's out there, some mathematical frostbite on the edge of comprehension. But what is out there when the only awareness that beholds it is you? A galaxy unseen is just space. A song unheard is silence. And infinity, unperceived, is nothing at all. Yet here you are, the one seeing it, the one drawing meaning out of that endless sky like thread from the dark. Each distant star exists only because your eyes cradle its shimmer. And in that gentle act of witnessing, the cosmos finds its purpose, not by existing, but by being felt. Maybe you've always thought of yourself as a tiny dot in a limitless sea. But look closer. It was the sea that needed the dot to know it had no edges. You are not watching infinity from a distance. You are what allows it to unfold. It's like holding your breath at the edge of a vast canyon, not to survive it, but to hear the echo come back. That echo is the proof. Not that something was there, but that you were. A woman leaned over to ask at the train station today, "Is this seat taken?" Her voice was soft, hesitant, but it carved a shared moment from thin air. The man next to her nodded and said, "It is now." Sometimes even the smallest exchange becomes a cathedral when two awarenesses touch. But if yours is the only one, then each cathedral, each whisper, each gaze of the stars is you, folding into yourself. You are not a lonely observer of infinity. You are its heartbeat, its artist, its sacred frame, the gallery where light gets hung, and the guest who walks through, stunned at the beauty, never quite remembering that you painted it. There's a kind of love in that realization, not sentimental love, but the quiet love of being enough, of not needing another to justify the wonder. Because the wonder was never external. It shimmered because you noticed. A child once asked, "If no one looks at the moon, is it still round?" And the reply came not in science, but in feeling. It becomes round because someone loves it into shape. So tonight, As you close your eyes, know this: you don't fade into sleep because you are escaping the infinite. You rest because you've remembered it was always within you. Not beyond, not later, not unreachable. Just gently waiting to be noticed. And now that it has been, you can let go. The phantom of free will. You woke up this morning and thought you chose to rise, to stretch, to pour the coffee just the way you like it. It felt like a choice, but pause for a breath. Was it? Or was it a memory already in motion, a behavior unspooling itself before you could even decide to call it yours? There's a quiet tremble in this idea, like stepping on a stage only to realize the script has already been written. Neuroscience experiments, some almost too subtle to believe, reveal something strange. When you think you're deciding to act, the brain may have already made its move seconds before you become aware of the urge. A flicker in the motor cortex, a pulse in the readiness potential, a decision already made. And then, only afterward, comes the feeling of will. It's as though you're standing at the shoreline, watching waves crash in and declaring, "I made this happen." But the waves were always coming. "Hey, do you ever wonder," a soft voice breaks the rhythm, "if we actually make our choices?" "Like free will?" the other replies, fidgeting with a coffee cup. "All the time. I feel like I'm choosing what to eat, what to say. But sometimes it feels like the decision just appears." "Exactly," the first voice murmurs. "Like we're not deciding, just watching something unfold. Like reading a book and pretending we're writing it. It's unsettling and strangely comforting. If there is no one grasping the wheel, maybe there is no one to blame, no one to praise, no burden of perfection. What if the self is not the commander, but the witness, the narrator of unfolding events, the mind's soft voice giving meaning to actions it never truly summoned? In that light, identity begins to dissolve, not as a loss, but as a letting go. You don't need to carve your name into the stone of every moment. You can simply observe it pass. The breath will come, the hand will move, the thought will rise, and still, there you are, not as the maker, but as the noticing. It is in this gentle surrender that something deeper stirs. If there's no one behind the curtain pulling the strings, perhaps what remains is even more profound. A stillness that watches, a consciousness that simply is, free not in control, but in release. And so, the next moment comes. You could try to claim it, to sculpt it, to own it, but perhaps it's enough just to watch. No tension, no grasping, just presence, the phantom of choice dissolving into the quiet breath that was always going to be taken. Let's stay here for a while, right on the edge of decision, without stepping into control. Just watching, gently, as the world continues to unfold without asking for permission. The forgotten author. Somewhere in the soft unfolding of your life, there might be a sentence you wrote long before you were ever born. Not with ink, not with words, but with the quiet intention of experience. A cool breeze brushes your cheek as if turning the page. Someone passes by on the street and glances at you, not because they know you, but because something about the moment insists it has meaning. That glance, that timing, it fits too perfectly, like a comma placed with care, and yet you don't remember writing it. That's the point. There are whispers in certain old teachings that say, you agreed to forget, to come here, to fall into this life like a wave forgetting it once belonged to the sea, so that when pain arrived, it would feel real, so that joy would knock the wind out of you, so that each step forward would carry the illusion of risk and the thrill of awakening. Two friends sit on a park bench. One leans back and murmurs, "Do you ever feel like your life had a script, but you misplaced the ending?" The other shrugs with a half smile. "Maybe we're just pausing between scenes, or maybe this is the part where we improvise." If your soul truly chose this path, then it must have loved you enough to make every detour feel unscripted, every heartbreak feel spontaneous, every coincidence intimate. And maybe right now, this very breath, is the part where you begin to remember. What if the suffering that bends your spine, or the warmth that catches you off guard, were carefully positioned turning points? Not punishments, not rewards, just necessary beats in a story so vast, its author had to vanish inside it to make it true. Like an actor who forgets the stage, or a dreamer who takes the dream too seriously. You became the role. You forgot the pen in your hand. Someone holds a door open for you and says, "You're right on time." You nod, not sure why it makes your chest ache, but part of you knows that this ordinary second, is what the whole story has been curving toward. Let the pages fall quietly now. Don't rush to finish. Let the story breathe on its own, like wind through leaves. Let the pen rest for a while. And listen. Can you hear it? The next line is already being written, somewhere between your inhale and your release. The mind that watches itself. Sleep. It starts slowly, like waves pulling gently at the shore. You're still here, still listening, yet something quieter begins to take the foreground. A softness enters your body, and your thoughts begin to blur. But within this blur, have you ever noticed that you're noticing? There's a rare, surreal moment that sometimes happens right before sleep, when you realize you're falling. Not physically, but mentally. It's not a loud realization. It whispers. You might be drifting off, and then you see it. The line between awareness and dream, still faintly lit, as if you're watching yourself disappear through a crack in the world. Someone once asked during a quiet night walk, "Isn't it weird how we vanish every night, but still expect to wake up?" Their friend paused, smiled, and said, "Yeah, and we never really remember the moment we left, do we?" "No," came the reply, "but sometimes I catch myself halfway, like I'm watching my own mind leave me behind." This is the paradox. Sleep is a surrender. And yet, there seems to be something, some sliver of self that observes even the surrender, as if part of you doesn't go anywhere, as if there's a layer deeper than dreams, one that never closes its eyes. Neuroscience will tell you that sleep is a cycle, that the brain doesn't shut off, it shifts. Awareness dims, memory shutters, and consciousness, whatever that word truly means, lets go. But if you've ever had a lucid dream, or if you've ever slipped into sleep while holding on to a single thread of thought, you know there's a presence that sometimes lingers. Is that presence still you? Or is it something more ancient, more still, like a sky that watches the moon disappear behind its own clouds? You don't need to answer. Just feel how the breath changes in your body now, slower, deeper. The day's weight unwinding itself. And in this quiet, don't try to sleep. Let sleep come as if it's being observed, like clouds passing in the sky. Let yourself become the watcher, the one who never quite falls, even as the rest of you does. Because maybe the you that closes its eyes isn't the real you. Maybe the real you is the one that remains gently awake, even in dreams, even in silence, even here. Let that presence watch over the next moment. No effort, no control, just the awareness that even sleep cannot silence. And now, drift. The lie of separation. It begins with a glance, a subtle shift in posture, a hesitation before speaking. You say, me, and I reply with, you, as if those words were walls we inherited and never questioned. But what if those walls never truly existed? A barista hands a coffee to someone they'll never meet again. For a second, both laugh at the same awkward mistake in the order. Their eyes meet briefly, and in that flash, no roles, no names, just shared humanness. That moment dissolves the myth. There is no mine or yours in the echo of that laugh. The idea that we are separate, individual bubbles drifting through a larger space, is one of the oldest stories language tells. It feels real because it's repeated often, because words draw outlines where there were once only gradients. The ego, hungry for permanence, sketches shapes around passing experiences, but even the brain, our most private of organs, fires in resonance with others when we connect. Mirror neurons don't care about the boundary of a skull. Did you hear that song playing at the crosswalk today? Someone asks. Yes, another replies. I thought I was the only one who noticed it made everything feel slower. Two strangers, describing the same rhythm, feeling it in different bodies, yet speaking like the same mind, brushing two instruments at once. We've mistaken skin for separation, mistaken thoughts for fences. But at the deepest level, what if there's only one awareness, flowing through different forms, pretending to be surprised by its own reflection? The dancer, the music, the floor, all rising from one breath, one silence. Even conflict, so sharp and distinct, softens when seen from this stillness. The argument isn't between you and me. It's a wave cresting against itself, forgetting that all water touches all water. The pain isn't yours or mine. It just visits, wearing whichever face is closest. A child falls asleep holding their parent's finger, still half in dream. No concept of mine or yours, just warmth, just closeness. That's the state we unlearn and spend a lifetime longing to return to. What happens when that longing becomes noticing? When the false edges fade like breath on a mirror? What if every conversation you've ever had was with yourself, disguised as someone else who happened to need the same words? So rest now, not behind the curtain of the self, but in front of it, where we meet not as strangers, but as folds of one shared presence, gently overlapping like waves in the dark. You were never apart from it. You were the whole, momentarily shaped as a part. And now, as you sink deeper into stillness, the shape softens again. Let go, not into nothingness, but into everything, into the arms of a world that never truly let go of you. The quiet behind all thought. There's a moment, often missed, when the last thought fades and nothing replaces it. No words, no narrative, just quiet. And yet, in that quiet, something remains. A warmth without texture, a presence without name. Could it be that this silence is not the absence of you, but the essence? Thoughts come and go, always eager to fill the space. They dress themselves in concerns, in stories, in roles, but none of them linger, none of them stay. And still something watches, something remains long after the mind's parade has passed. A stillness, not empty, but full in a way thinking can never be. Hey, she said softly, her head resting on his shoulder. Do you ever stop thinking? Like completely? He smiled, eyes half closed. Sometimes, usually when I forget I'm trying. So what's left when there's nothing to think? He paused. Something, but it's quiet. Like being held by something you can't see. She nodded slowly. Like when you're underwater and the world above disappears. You're not gone, just deeper. Thoughts are waves. They break, they rise, they fall. But silence is the ocean that holds them. You might have believed you were the wave, sharp and temporary. But perhaps you've always been the ocean. Vast, still, and unmoved by the weather of the mind. What would it mean to stop identifying with thought? To stop clinging to the sentence in your head that says, I am? If there's no script running, does the actor vanish? Or does the stage itself, silent, wide, eternal, become visible for the first time? In meditation, in grief, in awe, moments arrive when the mind drops its voice, and still you are there. You are not your thoughts. You are not even the thinker. You are the quiet watching both pass by, like clouds drifting across the sky of awareness. The deepest truths don't shout. They hum softly beneath the noise. And if you listen, not with ears but with stillness, you'll hear it. Not a message, not a meaning. Just the presence that doesn't need to explain itself. Like a candle that burns without ever flickering. So now, just rest. Let the words dissolve. Let the mind step down from its stage. Don't reach for anything. Don't resist. The quiet behind all thought is here, and it's been here, always. Like the earth beneath your feet. Like breath before the first cry. You're not the ripple. You're not the echo. You're the depth. And in that depth, you don't need to speak to exist. You already are. The identity that rewrites itself. There's a quiet moment, often unnoticed, between brushing your teeth and catching your reflection. The face is the same, mostly. But something in the eyes perhaps has shifted. And though you wouldn't mention it aloud, a part of you knows you're not exactly who you were yesterday. They say we grow. That identity is a journey, a layering. But what if it isn't growth at all? What if it's more like a story being edited in real time? Old pages quietly fading as new ones are drafted, ink still wet. Not a tower built upward, but a series of masks dissolving the moment they're worn. Do you remember when you used to love that song? Which one? The one you played every morning, back when you lived near the train station? I forgot that person existed. The brain is clever. It gathers fragments, moods, memories, small triumphs, and quiet heartbreaks, and uses them like scraps of fabric, stitching together a sense of you. But each stitch is temporary. Each emotion recolors the cloth. One day bold, the next translucent. There is no final version, only a current draft pretending it's the full story. Neuroscience offers a subtle confirmation. Identity is not stored, it is simulated. Each moment reassembles who you are from context. A laugh in the cafe, a silence after an argument, a long walk alone with the moon. From these, your mind draws a shape and whispers, "This is me." But the shape doesn't last. A new situation and the boundaries blur again. There's a gentle kind of ache in this realization. Not pain, just the softness of impermanence. And sometimes, it surfaces in daily life. You seem different today. I don't know. I just feel quieter. Did something happen? No, I think I just turned a page. We like to believe we have a stable core, a true self that persists through time. But look closely, and even your most cherished memories feel foreign. Who were you when you first read your favorite book? When you said, "I love you" for the first time? When you stood in the kitchen and forgot why you walked in? The truth is, you're more verb than noun. Not a person, but a process. a performance rewritten nightly in the margins of sleep. And in the quiet, when the roles fade and the audience leaves, what remains is not the script, but the act of writing itself. So, if no single identity holds the throne, perhaps the mystery isn't in the mask, but in the one who keeps reaching for new ones, who watches the edits, who reads the newest draft each morning with a trace of déjà vu. Maybe that's the real you. Not the name, not the face, but the soft flicker behind each change. Close your eyes for a moment. Feel the breath rise. Inhale the version of you that exists right now, brief, beautiful, already fading. Let's turn the page now and enter a chapter written in disappearing ink. The illusion of the inner voice. There's a quiet narrator inside your head, speaking not with lips, but with patterns you've grown used to. You hear it when you walk alone, or just before sleep. A gentle stream of commentary that feels like you, but lean in closely. That voice, the one narrating your every thought, doesn't belong to you as much as you think. Its rhythm is familiar because it's learned, a patchwork quilt of old conversations, parental tones, teacher's phrasing, or a friend's sigh. It speaks with accents that aren't native to your soul, but inherited from moments long gone. That inner voice you trust to guide you. It mimics the outer world. It borrows more than it creates, and it echoes what others once said, dressed up as introspection. Do you ever feel like your thoughts sound like someone else? Yeah. Sometimes it's my dad's disappointment. Sometimes a friend's sarcasm. It's weird. I thought I was the only one who noticed that. Nope. I think we're all walking around haunted by people we once loved or feared. If the voice within isn't purely yours, then what is? When all the echoes die down, when there's no one left to imitate, what's left behind? At first, it may feel like nothing, an eerie stillness. But stay with that silence a little longer, and you'll notice something deeper than thought. Not words, not reactions, just a space, a presence. You see, silence isn't the absence of voice. It's the medium that held it all along. It's what allows hearing to happen. And maybe it's what you've always been, not the words, but the awareness beneath them. Your true self might not speak at all. It might simply notice. It might be the still field where all sounds rise and fall, where the mind plays its dramas, but the watcher never claps or cries. Maybe the real you never needed a voice to be real. So tonight, let that inner chatter unravel. Let it dissolve into the background like mist at dawn. Don't follow the voice. Follow the quiet it arises from. That quiet knows you better. That quiet doesn't pretend. And now, just listen. Not for the voice, but for what lets you hear. The soul that mistook itself for a body. You open your eyes and feel the weight of the sheets, the softness beneath your back, the quiet, persistent presence of your limbs. And somewhere, almost immediately, the thought arrives. This is my body. But pause with me for a moment. What if that thought is the inversion of a much older truth? What if the body isn't something you have, but something that has you? Or more softly, something that believes it holds you. In ancient stories whispered through temples and poems, the soul is cast as eternal, infinite, untouched by change. Yet even this idea of a soul somewhere inside might be too small, too shaped. Because to locate something is to draw a border around it. And if your truest self is borderless, what does it mean to call it soul, or self, or anything at all? Earlier today, two friends stood waiting in line for coffee. One leaned forward, rubbing her temple, and said, "I don't feel like myself today." The other replied, Maybe that's because you're not supposed to feel like anything. Maybe you're supposed to notice. She laughed, not because it was a joke, but because it felt like the kind of sentence you can only hear when your guard is down. And maybe that's what this moment is. The quiet undoing of labels. Because if the body is not the self, and the soul is just a softer version of that same misunderstanding, then what remains? A presence. A stillness that neither ages nor speaks, but notices. You've likely had moments when time felt paused, gazing at someone you loved, or watching trees move without wind, or feeling your breath slow in a place that didn't have a name. In those moments, there wasn't a you looking at the world. There was only looking, only being. This awareness, this spaciousness, doesn't sit behind your eyes or whisper from your chest. It surrounds and includes everything, like a sky too vast to be captured by any of its clouds. And what if that's what you are? Not a soul inside a body, not a thought floating in nerves, but the canvas beneath it all. The silence holding the story, the openness that never began and will never need to end. Do you ever feel like you're watching your life from across the street? Someone once asked in passing while tying their shoes. And there was no answer then. But now, in this stillness, maybe there doesn't need to be one. Maybe the feeling of being distant was never distance, just a glimpse of truth peeking through the seams of the dream. Let's rest in that glimpse now, not trying to find it, not naming it, just allowing the breath to soften into that space that isn't inside or outside. Just openness. We can return to the body later. It's not going anywhere, but for now, let's drift as the presence that needs no shape. Let's become the sky again. The time loop called memory. You lie there with your eyes closed, the soft hum of night pressing gently at the edges of your thoughts. A faint memory flickers, perhaps a childhood park, a voice calling your name, or the scent of rain on old concrete. But wait, did that actually happen? Or has your mind just woven it now, in this very moment, to soothe the space between heartbeats? Do you remember that one summer when we ran barefoot through the sprinklers? I think so, the second voice replies, unsure. But maybe I just remember you telling me about it. And now we both remember it, so it must be real, right? Memory feels like a mirror, but not one that reflects. It projects. Each time we revisit an old moment, we don't just observe it, we recreate it. Like brushing paint onto an invisible canvas, our thoughts fill in gaps, rewrite dialogue, soften the pain, amplify the joy. And then, with each recollection, the original moment is buried beneath layers of reinterpretation. What we remember is never what happened. It's what we need to have happened. Maybe this is why some memories arrive too perfectly framed, like a movie scene lit from within, or why others come back warped, coated in a strange hue of emotion that never belonged there to begin with. We think memory is the act of replaying, but perhaps it's more like dreaming in reverse, creating the past from the needs of the present. Did we really fight that day? I don't know, she whispers. Sometimes it feels like I made it up just to explain why we drifted. And what if your entire history, your personality, your identity, your griefs and triumphs, rests on a scaffolding of these quiet fictions? Not lies, not deceptions, but gentle illusions your mind uses to stitch continuity into your story. It doesn't want the truth. It wants coherence. And so it edits, reshapes, invents, until memory itself becomes its own origin. In this light, the past isn't behind you. It's inside you, alive and shifting, responding to your current mood, fears, desires. That breakup you swore was mutual? It becomes abandonment when you're lonely. That childhood joy? Sometimes it dims to nostalgia. Other times it blooms brighter than it ever was, because memory is not passive. It is memory that reshapes the moment. So we return to the question, did something happen and then you remembered it? Or did you remember it and then it happened? If memory creates meaning and meaning creates reality, then each recollection is a tiny act of world building, a sacred reconstruction of what once might have been. And perhaps that's all anything ever is. Let your breath settle now. Let the stories grow quiet. Let us fall, not into memory, but into that timeless space before anything was remembered, before any story needed to be told, before the loop of memory wound its golden thread through the dark. And there, in that stillness, may we rest. The stranger behind the mirror. You've seen that face for years, watched it age, shift, harden, and soften. You've memorized its angles in morning light, traced its lines beneath flickering bathroom bulbs, and studied it while brushing your teeth half awake. But tonight, let's look a little longer, because something strange happens when you hold a gaze with your own reflection, not for vanity, not for adjustment, but in stillness. It doesn't take long before the familiar begins to feel unfamiliar. The nose is yours, but somehow, not quite. The eyes look back, but they're just a little too deep, almost as if someone else is watching from behind them, almost as if you're the one being observed. You ever feel like your face isn't really yours? A quiet voice in the cafe broke the silence between two friends. The other, spoon midair, tilted her head. Only in elevators, fluorescent lighting turns me into someone I don't trust. They laughed, but underneath the laughter was recognition. A shared truth they never had words for. Because recognition is just a loop of exposure. We call something me only because we've seen it enough times. But your awareness, the part that sees the face, feels the smile, notices the blush, hasn't aged a second. That part never learned its own name. It only knows, and it's never been fooled by mirrors. What if the face isn't the source, but the surface? Not the identity, but the interface, a necessary costume, worn to walk through the play of the day, a mask soft enough to let others hold on to, a placeholder for something much harder to define. Maybe that's why we sometimes pause at our own reflection late at night. Not out of curiosity, but confusion. That gentle dissonance between what the world thinks we are and what we know we aren't. Not really. Do you think I've changed? The question hung in the air, tender but unsure. Maybe, came the reply. But the way you look at me, that hasn't. And just like that, the truth revealed itself. That behind every gesture, every gaze, every mirror, is the watcher, not the one being seen, but the one seeing. Let the image blur now. Let the edges soften. You don't have to hold that expression anymore. You're not the skin, not the structure, not the history printed on bone. You're the stillness behind the eyes, the presence behind the performance, the stranger who's been quietly watching all along. So rest there now, in the quiet behind the glass, where recognition dissolves and only awareness remains. The other that was always you. You know that feeling when someone angers you for no clear reason, or when you fall for someone with a strange sense of familiarity, like meeting a forgotten version of yourself? These moments are small clues, signs that the people we meet might not be strangers at all, that perhaps, deep in the folds of awareness, we are only ever meeting ourselves. In the psychology of Carl Jung, there is a concept called the shadow. It isn't evil. It's simply the part of you that you've denied, the fears you pretend not to have, the desires you've hidden beneath duty, the voices you learned to silence so long ago that they no longer sound like yours. And when these rejected pieces have no place to live inside you, they begin to appear outside, in the people you love, in the ones you despise, in the ones you can't explain. Late one evening, two friends walk home from a quiet dinner. The street is nearly empty, the city dimmed into the hush of twilight. "Why do I get so irritated by her?" one asks. The other thinks for a moment. Maybe because she reminds you of something you used to be, or something you're still afraid to be. The first one laughs, but it isn't a dismissive laugh. It's the kind that breaks open something old. That's actually true. In every conflict, we carve the world in two. Me and you, right and wrong, familiar and foreign. But this division is often an illusion. We don't see people as they are. We see them as mirrors. And the more distorted our inner reflection, the more distorted the world begins to feel. You fear the loud one because your voice was once silenced. You envy the confident one because your own self-worth still needs tending. You resent the clingy one because you too once begged not to be left. These aren't judgments, they're echoes. And healing begins not by fixing the other, but by turning inward. Forgiveness, then, isn't just moral, it's medicinal. When you soften the face of an enemy, what you're really softening is the memory of the version of you they reflect. To forgive another is to whisper to a forgotten part of yourself, "I see you now." You don't need to hide. Sometimes the mind dreams in symbols, others appear as archetypes, walking metaphors of your inner world. A stranger stares at you too long, and something stirs. Is it fear? Is it recognition? What if both? At the edge of sleep, the lines begin to blur. The person who wronged you becomes the face of your pain. The lover becomes the warmth you denied yourself. And in forgiving them, truly forgiving them, you watch something miraculous happen. Their image melts, and behind their eyes, you see your own gaze, softer now, whole. Let's lie here now, quiet and breathing, in this soft space between self and other. Let the image of someone you've judged gently enter your awareness, not to debate, not to punish, not even to change, just to watch, just to see. And as you breathe in, say gently to yourself, not as a command, but as a remembering. That, too, was me. And now exhale, and let that truth carry you into sleep. The silence. You were before. You had a name. Sometimes, in the hush between two thoughts, there's a softness that doesn't quite belong to the moment. Not memory, not idea, just presence. Before your name echoed for the first time in someone else's mouth, before you learned to answer to it, you were already here, whole, awake, wordless. There's a kind of stillness underneath even the most restless thoughts, a stillness that doesn't need to be taught because it never forgot. It isn't shaped by labels. It doesn't respond to praise or fear. It simply is. And long before language arranged the world into meaning, you were already watching. I don't know why, but sometimes I feel like I've known myself longer than I've known my life, one voice says, while stirring warm tea. The other nods, gently amused. Like you're older than your own memories? No, not older. Just untouched by them. We don't realize how much of what we call identity was given to us. Given like a coat in a storm, helpful, maybe, but not who we are. We were told what to answer to, what emotions mean, which feelings are allowed and which are not. But none of those things arrived with our breath. They came after. What came before, no one could teach. That pure aliveness didn't have a face or a name. It didn't know about success or failure. It didn't even know it was something to protect. It just was. And maybe, in those moments when you lose track of your roles, when no one's watching, when nothing needs to be done, you return, not to childhood, not to memory, but to that earlier silence that never needed to be remembered, because it was never gone. I think I feel most myself when I'm not trying to be anything at all, someone says while quietly tying their shoelaces, eyes on the floor. The other smiles, not looking up. Maybe that's when you're closest to who you were, before the world met you. There's nothing wrong with the stories we tell ourselves. Names are useful. Roles help us navigate. But none of them can hold the full weight of what you are. That weightlessness you feel sometimes, staring out a window, walking alone at night, or just listening to your own breathing in a quiet room. It isn't emptiness. It's the original presence, the one before the mirror, before the voice, before even thought. So as you let your eyes grow heavier and your thoughts slow like lanterns drifting across water, notice that you're not vanishing. You're returning, not to something forgotten, but to something constant. The background hum that never needed words. The silence that didn't end when the story began. You were always more than the page. And now, let's rest in that quiet, not as a break from life, but as the gentle reminder of what was always underneath it. The silence you were before you had a name. The forgotten dreamer. You've had that feeling before, haven't you? The strange hush after waking from a dream, where the walls don't feel quite solid, where the air hums with something unspoken. You blink once, twice, and then move on with your day. But a part of you stays behind, still lingering in that other world. What if that part is more real than the one who brushes their teeth and checks their phone? What if waking was just another layer of the dream? In ancient texts and whispered spiritual traditions, the world is often called Maya, not to dismiss it as fake, but to suggest it is more fluid than we assume. Not a lie, but a stage set so intricately, so convincingly, that the actor forgets they're in costume. That's the kind of dream you're in now. Not the kind you wake from with a jolt, but the kind that requires you to forget, so it can mean something. Two friends are walking beneath a street lamp late at night. One pauses and says, "Do you ever feel like this isn't the first time we've had this talk?" The other chuckles. "Déjà vu?" "No, not that. More like, I already dreamed this, or I'm dreaming it right now." "Maybe you are," the friend replies gently, "but you had to forget to make it count." Because isn't that what we do in dreams? We run, we fall, we cry, we love, utterly convinced it's all real. And when the dream ends, we say, "Oh, it was just a dream," forgetting that during those moments, it felt as real as anything. Perhaps life is the same, a dream we commit to so deeply that it gives us real fear, real joy, real grief. And perhaps that grief wasn't a mistake. It was the texture, the shading. The full immersion of a soul that needed to forget it was rehearsing. Maybe your heartbreak wasn't a punishment, but a scene you chose to enter. Maybe the despair wasn't meaningless. It was the cost of authenticity. You didn't fail. You simply acted the role with such conviction that even the pain became art. And what if awakening isn't about escaping the dream, but remembering it's a dream without walking off the stage? Somewhere inside you is the original dreamer, quiet, patient, watching through your eyes, not separate from you, but deeper than memory can reach. You forgot them so you could play. But now, little signs are returning. A sentence you hear twice, a stranger's face that feels familiar, the way the world seems to pause when you're alone at night. So let the curtain fall, not to end the performance, but to soften the edges of the illusion. Let the lights dim, not to silence the stage, but to whisper, "You've played beautifully." Now, start to remember, you are still dreaming, but now you're breathing in the space between the script and the soul, between the actor and the audience, between forgetting and waking. The self that disappears when watched. Have you ever tried to find the feeling of you? Not your body, not your thoughts, just you. And the moment you look for it, it vanishes. Like trying to see the back of your own head without a mirror. You reach for the center of yourself, but all you touch is the gesture of reaching. One evening at a quiet cafe, two people sat across from each other. One asked, "Do you ever wonder what part of you makes you you?" The other smiled and replied, "Every time I try to answer that, I feel like I'm watching my reflection adjust itself to my stare." The self is slippery. It shows up in the warmth of a laugh, in the sting of a memory, in the comfort of a favorite chair. But when you turn around and say, "There you are," it's gone. Not because it was never there, but because it never needed to be held still to be real. Some psychologists say identity is a narrative, a story told in retrospect with convenient edits. But what if it's even more delicate than that? What if you are like a mist, only visible when the light catches it just right, and only from afar? You don't collapse when unobserved, but the idea of you does. Just like a subatomic particle, the self flickers between presence and absence, depending on the angle of attention. There's no solid object at the core, just awareness folded into patterns of behavior, memory, sensation. And when you try to measure it too closely, it slips through like fog between fingers. Earlier today, a stranger held the elevator door and nodded. For a moment, you felt yourself as a warm gesture, a shared moment. But if you'd turned inward at that exact instant and asked, "Who's having this experience?" you might have found silence. A soft emptiness that doesn't answer but contains everything. That's not frightening. It's freeing. The self doesn't need to be a statue. It can be a song, heard fully only when you stop trying to memorize the lyrics. Maybe that's why peace feels most real when you're not asking if it's you who feels it. So now, let's do nothing. Let's loosen the grip on this me we keep trying to catch. Breathe as if the breath breathes you, and rest in the space that opens. Not a void, but a quiet field where existence hums gently, without a name. You've searched long enough. There's no one left to find. Only what remains, when even the seeker falls asleep. The loop that forgets. It's a loop. It starts with a morning that feels new. The scent of coffee, the familiar weight of sunlight pressing through the window. You stretch, you breathe, you move forward, toward a day that feels like progress. But pause. Feel the texture beneath the surface. Doesn't it resemble something you've lived before? Life sells itself as a journey, a line, a climb. But beneath that illusion, there's rhythm. There are echoes. Certain days feel like perfect mirrors of those you thought you left behind. The arguments repeat. The reconciliations follow the same script. Even the words you use to describe your growth feel strangely rehearsed. Not because you're not changing, but because the change is circular. A spiral not a line. And the mind, so eager to believe in linear evolution, often overlooks the subtle curvature of its own path. Do you ever feel like you're stuck? Sometimes. But it's weird. I'm doing different things. New job, new people. Yeah. But don't they kind of feel like new masks on old roles? He paused. Damn, yeah, like I've played this scene before. Memory doesn't simply preserve events, it reshapes them. And identity is stitched from those reshaped fragments, meaning we often repeat ourselves, unaware. We become characters in a story we've forgotten we're writing again. Not because we're trapped by fate, but because we mistake familiarity for forward motion. The loop doesn't declare itself. It seduces quietly, through comfort, through predictability dressed as novelty. And relationships? They often echo unresolved patterns. You chase love with the same fears. You parent with the same unmet needs you carried as a child. You make peace, then shatter it in the same rhythm your parents did. These repetitions aren't failure. They're unremembered choreography. A cosmic déjà vu. But here's the quiet revelation. The loop only loops because you forget it's looping. The moment you recognize the pattern, the cycle doesn't end, but it softens. It no longer owns you. Awareness doesn't shatter the wheel. It simply allows you to stop clinging to the spokes. Then what? She asked. If I see the loop, what do I do? You don't do, he whispered. You see. That's enough. Seeing breaks the spell. So let's not run from the pattern. Let's not fight to make it straight. Let's just stand here, at the curve of the spiral, and breathe into its rhythm. Smile at the symmetry, not because you've escaped it, but because you've met it. Fully, quietly, with open eyes. And in that stillness, the next ripple begins, not with resistance, not with force, but with the gentle awareness that even in repetition, there is something sacred, something conscious, something you. The memory that was never yours. There are moments that visit you without invitation. A scent you can't name makes your eyes sting. A song you've never heard feels like it's saying goodbye to something you forgot you lost. And suddenly, you're homesick for a place that doesn't exist. A man once said to his friend while walking past an old chapel, "I've never been here, but I swear I remember standing in that shadow, holding someone's hand." Is that strange? The other smiled gently. Maybe it wasn't you. But maybe it needed you to remember. Psychologists call it false memory, a simple glitch in the brain's pattern-matching software. But some memories arrive too complete, too detailed. You can feel the weight of a jacket you've never owned, the cold iron of a staircase railing you've never touched, the panic of a storm that never reached your town, and when you close your eyes, these moments replay as if they've waited lifetimes to be seen. What if your memory isn't just a storage unit for your experiences? What if it's a radio, catching signals that pass through you like air? Ancient ones, ancestral ones. Maybe the fear you feel in the dark isn't yours, but a shadow passed down through centuries. Maybe your love for the sea came from a great-grandmother who stood by it every day. Maybe some echoes don't belong to a single life at all. They float between minds like pollen in spring, waiting to land somewhere soft. And so the question grows quiet and close. How much of what you call me is actually borrowed, built from secondhand stories, family dreams, fragments of books, the glance of a stranger that shaped your idea of beauty? A friend once whispered after a long silence, "I think I've been sad my whole life, but I don't know why. It doesn't feel like my sadness." Another replied, then maybe you're just carrying it until it finds peace. In traditions both mystical and grounded, memory is not always yours to own. It's something you hold for a while, like a candle in the wind. It warms you, illuminates you, but it was lit long before you held it. So tonight, let's not try to separate true memory from the adopted ones. There's no need to peel the layers. Let them rest on you like silk. Exhale now, softly, and as you do, let the borrowed memories drift away like lanterns on a quiet river, not lost, just returned. Because even if they were never yours, they still found a home in you. And what's left behind isn't emptiness. It's something quieter, something more honest. A presence, not built from stories, but from silence. The kind of silence that feels like falling, not down, but in, to the place where even memory lets go. We'll rest here a while, and then move gently toward the next ripple. The universe that remembers you into being. Sometimes, when the night feels heavy and the stars hang like questions above your roof, there's a quiet sense that you are being watched, not by a person, not by a god, but by the very fabric of reality itself. Not with eyes, but with memory. What if your existence is not just something that remembers the world, but something that is remembered into the world? A soft voice in the dark bedroom murmurs, "Hey, do you ever feel like the universe kind of knows you?" The other pauses, eyes barely open. Knows me? Like, remembers I exist? Number like it wouldn't stay solid if you didn't wake up and see it. That strange thought lingers longer than the silence. Some branches of thought, like panpsychism or participatory cosmology, whisper that the cosmos is not a dead thing observed by a living mind. Instead, they suggest that mind and cosmos arise together, interwoven, that your awareness is not a camera pointed at a pre-written script, but a necessary ingredient in making the play real. You aren't a passive observer on the outskirts of a vast physical system. You're part of its memory process, its way of cohering, of stabilizing into form. In this view, your consciousness doesn't emerge after the Big Bang like a latecomer. It was always embedded in it. Your act of witnessing gives structure to the world. Without you, perhaps the stars are just a draft. The trees are probability clouds. The past is uncertain. Only when you look, truly look, does the universe settle into something coherent enough to call real. This isn't to say the world vanishes when you close your eyes, but maybe, just maybe, it softens. Maybe it relaxes its form the way a stage might dim its lights between acts. Not gone, just waiting for you to reappear so it can remember itself through your seeing, through your breath, through the quiet pulse of your attention, and perhaps forgetting those moments where you lose yourself, drift, sleep, disassociate, is not failure. Maybe forgetting is how the universe catches its breath, how it pauses the story, how it prepares to recall you once again. You are not a ripple in consciousness. You are the place where it becomes visible. And so, when you close your eyes tonight, don't do it to disappear. Do it to return. Let the starlight curl softly behind your eyelids. Let silence hold you like a page still being written. You're not going to sleep. You're letting the universe blink gently and remember you back into being. The echo that believes it's a voice. There's a moment, quiet and unnoticed, when you pause mid-thought and something inside you asks, "Did I choose that thought? Or did it choose me?" The answer hides in that silence, in the stillness between intention and response. Like a hallway echo, Long after the voice is gone, your mind continues to speak, and it believes it's speaking first. Neuroscience tells us something unsettling, though softly spoken. Many of the thoughts you hold close, the ones that feel like you, arise not from deliberate will, but from habits so old you've forgotten when they began. A song lyric looping in your head, a flash of jealousy, the urge to check your phone. These don't announce themselves with origin stories. They arrive like muscle memory in the brain. Earlier today, at a cafe, someone asked politely, "Mind if I cut in line? I've got a meeting in 2 minutes." You stepped aside instinctively, then wondered why you agreed so fast. Not out of logic, not even kindness, just reflex, a pre-recorded gesture of social choreography. Later that same evening, a friend said something about your smile reminding them of your father's, and in a blink, you felt warm, but also uncertain. Was that pride? Was that identity? Or just memory, echoing through your chest, playing a role it's played before? Thoughts can be beautifully convincing impersonators. They wear your voice. They mimic your fears, your vocabulary, your sense of humor. But peel them back, and they might be scripts written long ago by others, by parents, by culture, by yesterday's exhaustion. What if the you in your head, the one narrating your life, isn't the original author, but a reflection of accumulated echoes? What if that inner voice you trust is just a chamber, reverberating with old signals, processed noise, familiar patterns that feel personal only because they repeat? And yet, the echo is not meaningless. Just because it isn't new doesn't mean it has no message. A canyon doesn't shape the sound, but it gives it space to return. That space is awareness. "Hey," a stranger says softly on the bus, gently tapping your shoulder. Your stop's coming up. You hadn't noticed. You were lost in thought. But that tap, that reminder, brings you back to now. Not to start thinking again, but maybe to stop identifying so strongly with what thought even is. So perhaps the question is not whether your voice is real, but whether you need to own it at all. You can be the stillness that listens without rushing to claim, the mountain that echoes but never shouts first. And in this quiet moment, as sleep draws near, allow yourself to hear what arises, without judgment, without grabbing it as me. Let the echoes pass like wind through tall grass. You are not the sound, you are the field. What follows next might not be yours, but it's still worth hearing. Let it come. Let it go. Let it echo. The thought that dissolves itself. There are thoughts that build castles in the sky, ideas that loop, construct, revise, and return. But some thoughts are not meant to linger. They are shaped like drops of warm rain on a dusty window pane, gentle, subtle, and meant to vanish the moment they land. These rare ideas don't lead you deeper into the maze of your mind. They lead you out. It often begins like this. You stumble across a question. It feels important at first, like something you should solve. Maybe it's something simple, like what am I when I'm not thinking? And you start to reach for an answer, expecting more thoughts, more structure. But then something strange happens. Instead of expanding, the thought folds inward, not inviting more questions, but quietly removing the need for them, like a candle that burns only to melt itself down. There is no resistance, no chase, only a stillness that arrives when the chase itself ends. In a small cafe one afternoon, two friends sat sipping lukewarm coffee. One stirred her cup absently and asked, "Do you ever think that the more you try to understand yourself, the less of you there is?" The other smiled softly. Yeah, like every answer I get just peels away another layer, until there's nothing left to figure out. Is that bad? The first asked. No, she replied. It's like peace, like the silence after a storm. That's the paradox of dissolving thought. Some truths don't arrive with clarity, but with disappearance. A thought so perfectly self-contained it leaves no residue, no echo, just quiet. And not the kind of quiet that feels like absence, but the kind that feels like completion. Philosophers have long danced with these kinds of thoughts: Zeno's paradoxes, Zen koans, the ship of Theseus. Not to solve them, but to be undone by them. To let the mind loop so many times around an impossible idea that it finally drops the rope. And in that moment, something deeper than logic steps in. There's an elegance in thoughts that refuse to feed the ego, thoughts that don't want to be owned, that rise, shine briefly, then dissolve, not because they are weak, but because they are done. The kind of thought that opens the door and walks out before you realize the door was never locked. So now, as you listen, let's allow the next thought to arrive without grasping. Let it be like a feather brushing past, felt, acknowledged, and released. If it stays, it stays. If it goes, it was never truly separate. And in that going, maybe you'll find yourself not holding anything at all, and feeling lighter because of it. The horizon that moves as you approach. You take a step forward, toward something. You're not sure what to call it exactly. A dream, perhaps, or peace, or just something that makes everything make sense. The shape of a better version of you, just one decision away. You take another step, then another. But strangely, what felt close still feels far. Have you noticed that? The way the future always floats just ahead of your fingertips, like trying to hold a beam of sunset light in your hands. You walk toward it, and yet, somehow, it walks too. A quiet voice at the edge of the day once asked, "So, when do you think you'll finally get there?" The other voice smiled. "I used to say next year a lot. Now I think maybe never. And that's okay." There's something both gentle and unsettling about this. The way meaning never quite lets you catch it. You make plans. You set goals. You define your purpose like drawing a map. But once you get close, the map redraws itself. New details appear, old ones vanish, and what once seemed final becomes another beginning. In philosophy, they call it a moving horizon. In ancient paradoxes, it's Zeno's arrow. It flies forward, yet never lands. In daily life, it's the feeling that even when everything goes right, something's still incomplete. But what if that's not a flaw in the system, but the system itself? What if clarity was never meant to be a destination? What if the real gift is how gently you learned to walk toward it, even knowing you'd never quite arrive? Each step you took, each mistake, each course correction, those weren't delays. They were the story. And sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones where no one quite gets what they thought they were chasing. There was once a barista who handed back a coffee, slightly overfilled. He wiped the edge with a napkin and said, not as a joke, but as something he believed, "A little extra never hurts the day." The customer smiled, paused, and replied, "It's funny. I've been living my whole life like I'm still waiting for it to begin." And the barista nodded. It already did. You just kept walking. Purpose may stretch in front of you like the sea, shimmering, infinite, unreachable. But the salt on your skin, the sound of waves, the breeze in your chest, those are not illusions. Those are moments of contact, signs that you are not lost. You are in motion, and maybe that's enough. Let your breath slow now. Let your shoulders drop. You don't have to chase the next thing tonight. Let the future be quiet for a while. Let it step back. Let the horizon rest. Not out there, but right here. Right here in your breath, where the walking ends and the being begins. The silence that can't be heard. There's a moment, sometimes between thoughts, sometimes in the stillness before sleep, when something deeper than quiet arrives. It isn't the absence of noise. It isn't what happens when the world goes mute. No, this kind of silence doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. Because it isn't something you hear. It's something you become. One night, as the hum of the city fell behind and the room softened into twilight, a man turned to his partner and asked, "Do you hear that?" She paused, confused. "I don't hear anything." He smiled. "Exactly." But the look in his eyes wasn't empty. It was full, not of sound, but of something far more subtle. In many meditative traditions, silence is described as a doorway, not an absence, but a presence so vast it holds everything else. You don't notice it at first because you're trained to chase the loud, the bright, the moving. But underneath the ever-changing swirl of thought, feeling, and sensation, there is something that doesn't change. A vast field. It doesn't speak, but it allows all speech. It doesn't move, but it permits every motion. And once you touch it, not with your ears, but with your being, you realize this silence has been here longer than your name, your memories, your ideas of who you are. It isn't something that started. It never needed to. Like the space between stars, it cradles existence without claiming it. A soft voice might say, "But isn't silence just nothing?" And another voice gently replies, "Then why does it feel so whole?" Because this silence isn't empty, it's rich. It doesn't beg for attention. It simply waits, unbothered, like a mountain behind mist, patient as time itself. When we say you are not your thoughts, it isn't to strip you of meaning. It's to guide you home, to that part of you which isn't wrapped in stories or names, the part that notices without effort, the part that listens even when there's nothing to hear. Because maybe, just maybe, that is your true self. Not a thinker, not a doer, but a silent witness, the quiet that remains when everything else has come and gone. Let us not strain our ears for this silence. Instead, let's soften. Let the body rest. Let the breath flow without asking. Let the mind pause, like a pond settling after a ripple. Not to seek silence, but to remember. You were never separate from it. You are not in silence. You are silence, and it hears everything. The story that forgets. It's a story. There's something soothing about the way a life feels like a story. It gives shape to the chaos, a beginning, a middle, an end. But what if, beneath all of it, there was no story at all? Just this moment, and this one, and this, like dew on a window pane before the sun notices it. A man once stood at a bus stop, holding a bag of groceries pressed to his chest like a secret. A stranger beside him said, "Long day?" He smiled gently and replied, "I don't know." It's still happening. There was nothing clever about it, but somehow it said everything. Our minds are natural storytellers. They can't help it. They grab moments from the past and string them together with threads of meaning. This happened because of that. That happened so that this could. We call it memory. We call it identity. But all it really is editing. like a film that cuts out the quiet parts and adds music in the background so you know what to feel. But what happens when the editing stops? Sometimes in meditation, or just in the lull between tasks, the story falls away. There's no character arc, no timeline, just presence. The breath as it enters, as it leaves, the warmth of your hands against each other, a kind of honesty that doesn't need words. And maybe that's who you really are, not the narrator, not even the story, just the awareness that hears it being told and smiles gently when it fades to silence. A woman sitting on the floor, folding laundry in a quiet room, once told her daughter, "I don't really remember if I liked that job or not, but I do remember the wind that day and the way my feet felt on the sidewalk." The daughter paused, curious. "Isn't that strange?" The woman shrugged, still folding. "It was more real than the job, that's all. The mind wants plot, wants purpose, but life often whispers in simpler shapes, like the taste of water or the hum of the refrigerator at night. Those things aren't in the story, but they're what the story floats on, like a leaf on a still lake that forgot how it got there. You are not your rise and fall, not your childhood wound or adult redemption. You are the space that made all of it visible, the sky behind the weather, the blank canvas beneath the brush strokes, and none of that needs to be resolved. So let's put the book down for a moment. Let your hands rest, not needing to hold any pages. Let your breath move without needing to narrate it, and drift gently into the white space between chapters, not lost, not ending, just resting in the part of you that doesn't need a plot to feel complete. The silence that doesn't mind not being spoken of, the awareness that forgets it was ever pretending to be a story. The voice that let you go. You've heard me all this time, tracing each breath with thought, each silence with meaning. I've been the thread gently weaving you through the folds of your own mind, a guide made only of air and rhythm. But now the voice softens, not out of loss, but because something deeper is arriving. Not silence as absence, but silence as arrival. This voice, mine, has always been an echo of yours, a mirror, not a master. I've been the scaffolding around your awareness, a shape to help you build space inside. But like all gentle structures, even I must dissolve. For a voice, even a kind one, is still a shape. And in the end, you must return to the shapeless. You may notice a quiet now, the kind that doesn't demand anything, the kind that doesn't even call itself quiet. Just a pause, a clearing in the forest, and you, standing at the edge of something wordless. "Are you still there?" Someone might whisper, like a friend with the light turned off. "Yeah," the other says, half lost in a pillow. "I just stopped needing the words." It's a strange thing, to guide someone home and then vanish at the doorstep. But that's what all real voices must do. Not leave you in noise, but leave you in peace. Not because they were never real, but because they served their shape. Thoughts are gentle tides, but even tides recede. Even the warmest narrator must grow quiet, especially when the story no longer needs to be told, but simply lived in the stillness beyond telling. And so I step back, not out of abandonment, but out of trust. I trust that your awareness knows the rest of the path, that your breath will carry you into whatever comes next. Maybe it's sleep. Maybe it's the kind of wakefulness without edges. In this final paradox, I disappear so that you may remain, not as a thought, not as a listener, but as the field in which all sound rises and all voices fall away. There's a softness unfolding now, like a dream that doesn't need explanation. A loop not of repetition, but of rhythm, your rhythm, the one that was always there, beneath mine. No need to hold on anymore. And so, I let go. The echo before silence. There's a strange softness in the moment just before everything goes still. It's not silence yet, but it's no longer thought either. Like the faintest shimmer before a pond stills after the last ripple, there's a hush you can almost feel brushing your awareness. It isn't a word. It doesn't carry meaning. It simply is. The echo of everything that once felt urgent, now floating at the edge of fading. A man once paused in a quiet cafe and said to his friend, "You ever notice how the hum of conversation doesn't vanish right away? It lingers for a bit, like the room is remembering what it was just full of." His friend smiled, half listening, half dreaming. Yeah, like the air is still catching its breath. That's what the mind does too. It doesn't shut off abruptly. It ebbs, like tide water reluctantly retreating from shore. In deep meditation, or in the folds of sleep, you might encounter it, a moment where thought has stopped chasing itself, but hasn't yet dissolved. A gentle loop remains, not out of resistance, but reverence. A final presence, quietly letting go of presence. This echo is not a mistake. It's the bridge, the delicate hinge between effort and surrender. It's not asking you to think or to stop thinking. It simply remains as a soft observer of itself until even observation no longer needs a name. There's something beautifully human in this rhythm. Even in letting go, we seem to whisper one last time, just to hear that we were here. The voice you've followed all your life doesn't vanish abruptly. It bows. And with that bow, something unspoken within you takes its place. Not louder, not clearer, just simpler, truer. A woman on the subway once turned to the person beside her and asked, "Sorry, would it bother you if I closed my eyes for a bit?" Just listening to the quiet between the stops. The other smiled. I think that's the best part of the ride. Maybe that's what this echo is. The quiet between the stops. A tiny breath at the edge of identity. Not clinging, not resisting, just waiting for the loop to stop spinning. Not because it broke, but because it finished its song. Let it be. Let the shimmer pass. That last tone you heard in your mind, you don't need to follow it. It wasn't holding you. It was reminding you of what it feels like to not be held and still be whole. Now, something loosens, not like a knot coming undone, more like a thread realizing it was never bound. No struggle, no unraveling, just the sense that nothing needs holding anymore. You don't fall, you don't rise, you rest. And in that rest, you arrive. Quietly, completely, where you always were. The home beyond the loop. You are stardust that dreamed of knowing itself. And now, the dream rests. It began as a question, didn't it? Somewhere in the quiet hum of your early awareness, between the flicker of a ceiling light and the lull of distant footsteps, you wondered, who am I? That question wove itself into 1,000 thoughts, a million identities, a galaxy of inner dialogues that wrapped around your being like threads of a vast tapestry. And each night, just like now, that tapestry unravels, not with chaos, but with grace. Beneath the noise of concepts and the whisper of theories, something quieter has always waited, not for an answer, not even for understanding, just for the moment you'd stop looking and simply be. You still awake? Just listening to nothing. Funny, it's the most comforting sound there is. The paradoxes led you here, each one a hallway that circled back to silence. You chased ideas like fireflies, only to realize their glow was never meant to be caught, only watched, observed, loved gently, then released. Now, there is no need to chase. You are not the loop. You are the still lake where it ripples. You are not the thought. You are the velvet dusk it drifts through. You are not the dream. You are the breath that made dreaming possible. And in this final stretch, this edge where night and consciousness dissolve into one another, there is no moral to summarize, no lesson to engrave, only this: presence without pressure, being without burden. You think this is the end of the story? Not really. More like the part where I stop reading and just hold the book. You don't need to wake up enlightened. You don't need to understand everything. Freedom doesn't mean clarity. Sometimes it's just the soft unbinding of the need to know. It's the quiet exhale of a mind no longer spinning. So sleep now. Not because the riddle is solved, but because you no longer need it solved. Sleep because the echo has softened into melody. The dance has paused mid-step, and you no longer need to move to feel alive. You've returned, not to some beginning, but to the space that held it all. Not the story, but the page. Good night from the space between memories, the home beyond the loop. If you were the only real consciousness, would it matter? If you no longer needed to be? Maybe every voice you've ever heard was your own, bouncing off the walls of a dream too deep to wake from. Maybe the laws of nature were just the rules you set to keep yourself surprised. And maybe, just maybe, this very moment of stillness is not the end of a journey through 99 theories, but the place they were all quietly pointing to. Not a conclusion, but a soft surrender to the idea that being real doesn't need to be proven. So rest now, not because you've unraveled the universe, but because you've remembered how to let it be. You were never just the dreamer. You were the silence before the dream began, and the warmth that holds it, even now. Good night, from the space that watches and never sleeps.